Lately, there's been a lot of questions about the interlinking setup and what the best way to do it is. For a long time, SERPShaker has had this next post, previous post set up in here, and also next page, previous page, depending on what kind of setup you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing posts, you're going to want to use this. If you're doing pages, you're going to want to use that. And when you use next post, it asks you to use the hyperlink and everything there. Now, this setup is what was recommended for, like I said, the long, ever since we released SERPShaker, we pretty quickly added this functionality in there. And something to understand about this functionality is that it is basically built around the WordPress functionality that's already in there. That how they find adjacent posts, and I just kind of modified it a little bit so that we could use it within our setup. But basically, it does rely on database queries to kind of find the next post and the previous post. It's not 100% dependent on your shortcode list. It's more the WordPress built-in functionality. So you'll see some themes that whenever you're looking at a particular post, they already have a previous and next type setup. Then you might have seen on some themes, and that this is using this these buttons use that same functionality to a certain extent. I just basically changed up a few things on it, but it is category based as well. So whenever you're building your post, and you add a certain category to it, then the interlinking is going to happen within that category. So if that category is, for whatever reason, you end up creating, like each individual post has its own category, then that's going to cause some issues. Um, the other thing with it that, why I'm kind of making this video and kind of showing you how to do it a slightly different way is because it is, like I said, like I mentioned, it does do some database queries whenever it's doing that. And the link itself, the hyperlink is not hard coded into the post itself. It does have to kind of do some processing. So in some large sites, it could cause some issues, meaning that it does slow down the site a little bit because it does have to do that query. So when I included the ability to use the previous and next type functionality, meaning that when you're building it out, you've got your, let's say we're doing keywords, so you've got your keyword that is, whenever SERPShaker goes to build this post, it looks at the shortcodes. Let me open this under new tab. It looks at the shortcodes, and let's say, oh shoot, I don't even have keyword in here anymore. So I need to make a new shortcode. Let me pause the video real quick. So now I do have a keyword shortcode. I was doing some testing earlier and I didn't have a keyword, so I must have deleted it. But now I have a keyword shortcode, which this shaker page right here is built on keywords. So now that my shortcode, I do have keywords. It's got a list of keywords there, just something I found random. And so whenever SERPShaker is going through and building out this page based, or the post or the pages based on keywords, it's going to use these right here. So when it's going through and let's say it's going to build the very first one, then it's got the ability now to pull the next one as well. So that's what that next functionality is. It just goes down the list. And previous, it basically just offsets. So this one right here, this is the very first one on the list. If you were to link to previous, it would actually link to the very last one. So it just does a loop. So you get a very controlled loop, and it gives you more control over what you're doing. So now if we're going to, let's say that we want to build the interlinking by doing it mostly manual. So what you're going to want to do is, it's very important that you know your kind of starting URL and also the permalink structure that you're using. For the most part, if you followed any of my trainings, we most of the time we just use this post name, meaning going back over to the shaker page, whatever we have up here, this is going to be the slug. And so this slug is going, this, this is just using keywords. If you had any other words in here, you have to keep that in mind because you have to add it to the hyperlink that you're creating. So just, some kind of things to keep it in mind. It is a little bit more complicated to do it the manual way instead of using the buttons, but you'll see that the end result is going to be a little bit cleaner. It's going to give you full control over how to link things together, and it's going to kind of give that hard-coded link on the post itself so that you don't have to worry about WordPress having to run any queries or do any kind of processing when it's trying to load the post. So if we just, let me just skip down a few lines here. And so let's say testing new interlinking setup. Let's say I did want to go ahead and build a hyperlink to the next post. So the first thing you would do is you would just use the functionality to insert and edit a hyperlink. Now, you're going to want to have this copied. Basically, the beginning part of your URL, you're going to want to have it keep copied because that's going to be the beginning part of your hyperlink. So we're building, we're hard coding this hyperlink in there. Now, the next part is going to be what would be considered the slug. And this is where you basically want to kind of get a little bit tricky with the shortcodes, but we know we're using the shortcode keywords. We know we're doing that. We know that we want to let's say we're building to the next post. So we know we want to do next. And then the other part of it is anytime that we're building a hyperlink, we want to make sure that we use this URL modifier. What that does is basically it's a functionality that runs in there that basically takes your keyword, whatever's in this shortcode list, takes these keywords, runs them through the WordPress, just a functionality that's built into WordPress, basically the same exact setup that they use to build their slugs. So whenever you use keywords up here, whenever you build, any kind of word up here, and there's, you'll see that whenever you look at any WordPress URLs, they're all lowercase. They strip out any special characters. The spaces get turned into a dash and stuff like that. So that's what that URL is basically making. It's basically saying, take this and make sure that it's a URL friendly setup that what you're giving me. So we want to, so far we've got the beginning part of the URL. We've done the shortcode keywords. We want to say that it's the next one. And we want to format it in URL. We want to make sure we close that out. Now, if I had, for example, something like, let's say best new, and then it was that. So let me show you what that would look like. Once again, we start with our URL. Now this part you do have to do it you have to create that hyperlink yourself. So if you did best new, then you would do best dash new dash, and then you would do keywords underscore next underscore URL and close the squiggly there. Okay, so notice how it kind of creates that there. Now the other thing that you want to do is, let's say you wanted to change here's the URL and the text. You can change that and you can make that keywords. Let's say you want to have, you want next. So we're linking to the next one. And this one you can go ahead and format it in Word format, meaning every single word gets, the beginning of the word gets capitalized, the beginning letter of the word gets capitalized. So then we can update that so you see that, that builds it that way. So that will be linking to the next in this setup. And then we would just repeat the same exact stuff for the next one. Let's, ahead of time, we can go ahead and say we want keywords, previous word. We can select it. And we're going to hyperlink that to, we'll start with the URL. Once again, remember up here we did best new, so we want to do best new dash keywords underscore previous underscore URL. Don't forget that URL part because that's going to make sure that it's formatted correctly. So now that we've got those two, basically this is creating that interlinking setup. So let's go ahead and build 10 pages so you can take a look and see what that looks like. So first I'm going to go and save draft, make sure that these changes take effect. And then we're going to build pages and post. I have it set to post. But this setup would work for both pages and posts. You don't have to change anything unless your slug setup is a little bit different. So you just have to kind of play around with it a little bit and get familiar with what your slug setup is. But if we go over to post, we can take a look, and we just want to look at the actual text. And let me see if I can change this over to code editor so we can see how the links are actually hard coded in here. And it does have best new, and then it goes into the keyword there. And so it's linking to the next one, linking to the previous one. This keyword is a Alts Minecraft list. So if we go over to our keyword list, we look for that Alts Minecraft list. There's some duplicates in here. I didn't even check for that. But we see that the next one is NordVPN list, and the previous is Minecraft list. And so that's because I've got some duplicates in here. But it does, I think if this is the particular one we're looking at, the previous one, it's a duplicate, so it really doesn't make sense. But the next one does link to the correct one. But if you were to do the same thing using the other code, the previous code that we had, you would actually just see a shortcode in here. So the shortcode would have to be processed through WordPress before it actually loads, and that's why, and what I mentioned, it can actually slow things down. So if we go back and we take a look at this page, let's do this one, the Hulu one, you'll see that it links to the next one, Hulu, which is, I think this is a duplicate, but it does link to the previous one. And you want to click on these when you're building things out and make sure that it does load up. If you get a 404 error, then that means that when you were setting up the Shaker page, if you get a 404 error when you do that, then take a look at your setup here. Take a look at this. Something in here is not configured correctly, and it's not allowing you to actually link to the new one, to the next one. So the easiest setup is to, when you're building this Shaker page, just leave this completely just keywords itself, or the shortcode itself. That way you don't have to worry about it. If you have any kind of spinning or anything going on in here, you could copy that same spinning as well, but you may run into some situations where it won't work as well. So ideally, your slugs will be as simple as possible so that you can interlink correctly. And that would be, this is the way that I would do things moving forward and set things up moving forward so that you don't have to rely on WordPress to choose the next one, the previous one. It's just solely 100% going off of the shortcodes that you've got in here. And it does, like I said, it does do that nice offset so that you basically get a perfect loop. You get, when you're building your Shaker pages or when you're building your post, the very first one previous will link to the very last one, so you get that nice loop. And then the last one the when it clicks on next, it actually goes to the top of the list again. So you get a nice loop. So as you build, as if you have multiple shaker pages and they're using different shortcodes, then you're gonna get this interlinking setup of little mini loops, mini interlinking loops within your website to just kind of make the bots keep on going in that circle navigating through correctly. But yes, this will be using the new setup that we've got, using the next and previous modifiers, and using that URL modifier as well alongside with it is going to be the best way to have this working correctly.